Welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Lens. This is Jake along with Scott, and we are in Lebanon, Kentucky, which is, for people who don't know, it's just south of Bardstown. And we are at one of our favorite places, Limestone Branch Distillery, and we're joined by do-it-all everything man here at Limestone Branch, Stephen B. Beam. So, Stephen, great to have you back on the Bourbon Lens. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. It's great to be back with you guys, and yeah, it's an exciting time to be in Kentucky, right?
Yeah. It's September. This will be the last podcast of Bourbon Heritage Month. And so Kentucky's got a lot to celebrate during this month, but bourbon in general has a lot to celebrate. So, you know, for you as a craft producer and continuing to grow, what's it mean to be a part of, you know, the Kentucky bourbon just sphere more and more each year?
Oh, it's great. You know, when we first started, people would ask what a goal was for me. You know, obviously one was bringing back one of the family brands back into the fold, but it was always just to be, you know, relevant in the conversation. You know, and I think we are.
Yeah.
I think we've achieved that goal. So, and that's important. You know, that you're doing things that your peers and the people in the who are very interested in bourbon are happy with and are interested in.
Yeah. And speaking of that, we're drinking one of the things that has become acclaimed around here. And it's a label that most people are going to recognize right away because it's black, and there's not a lot of black labels out there with a real bright red and a really good depiction of Yellowstone. We're drinking a single barrel of Yellowstone. And I have to say, this one's pretty damn good.
It's very oatmeal heavy.
Yeah.
It's like almost like an oatmeal cookie.
Yeah.
It just reminds me of, like, there's hidden whiskey everywhere. And if you're not picking up different barrels of whiskey all the time, you're doing yourself a damn shame.
Right.
Like that's what's so crazy about it, because, you know, I go to reach for different things, and I reach for Limestone Branch, my single barrel, quite often, and the limited editions over time. We'll talk about those in a minute. But, you know, this one, I think they're just all so unique, and they're all a little bit different, and they're beautiful to like photograph. That's what I think a lot of people don't realize, like how beautiful the bottle is.
We are very fortunate, you know, with the brand, that they had on point, you know, logos and advertising and print from early on. I mean, that is still the 1872 logo that we use for for the Yellowstone. We've not changed it. So,
yeah,
you know, that just tells you how strong the graphics were, how strong they were. So this label that we use for the single barrel, the black, was actually derived from an export label that they did back in the 70s. Yeah. So it's modernized a little bit, but basically the same as that export label.
You know, that's really interesting. Like, because there's one other famous brand that went black when they went, you know, overseas to Japan, right? So it's weird that they would go with a darker color, you know, export versus, you know, what, you know, the white and the gold, because Yellowstone back in the day, for people who don't know, you love it.
It's the most recognizable label for me, because that's what my grandfather drank.
Yeah.
So when I see Yellowstone, it's just memory.
Yeah. And like that's the cool thing. Like, it pops a lot of knowledge, because people who have drank for a long period of time or like have been around, like, Yellowstone's a label and a brand that still continues to shine. And so as we think about that shining through, like, you all are starting to put your all's thumbprint, you know, for lack of a better term, on it. And one of the things, you know, before we get into the brand new, you this year released Family Recipe, which came out in a red bottle.
Right.
You know, what really brought that to fruition to think about, you know, you all putting your imprint on the Yellowstone label?
Well, you know, that's the first that had been our juice that we had done. And it's a collection of, from the very beginning through about last year. And if you remember, we were making a barrel or so a week, you know, early on. And then, you know, we went up to a barrel a day. And so there weren't a whole lot of barrels to begin with. And you know, some of it was on very simplistic equipment, you know, things that we had made. And so, you know, I think that reflects in the whiskey itself. And it's definitely a pot still as opposed to a column still.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, when they taste bourbons that have been exclusively like from craft pot stills, they're not used to that, because they're used to the column, which is the majority of bourbon made is made with column.
Yeah. Well, and we call it what? Pot funk, right? Like there's this funkiness, right?
Yes.
There's different notes. It's brighter typically, or you can get really those deep sugars a lot of time. Like, and there's something to say about non-clean cut whiskey, right? Because you could run the still one day, your team could be running the still the next. So the cuts could be slightly different, even though they're similar.
Right.
And that's what I think makes pot still whiskey unique, is it's not always the same. It's similar, but it's not always the same.
Right.
And so like when you think about blending all of that back, was there like notes you were looking for, a flavor profile that you all are trying to create to bring that out?
Well, we were, of course, using the family yeast and then the family recipe as far as the grains go. So I was trying to let those notes speak for themselves. Also, we had a pretty set head cut and tail cut.
Yeah.
So we cut it a little bit lower than some, but not as low as others. So we're kind of right in there, actually in the mid 90s.
Yeah.
Is where we cut, just below 100.
Okay. Yeah. And so I think that's what's interesting. So like Scott and I first had it, we opened it up when we were having a cigar night at my house.
Yep.
And we were like, man, this is bold. Like it was so big. And then Scott pulls it out a couple, weeks later, a month later, and was like, man, this is completely changed. Like that bottle, like benefited so much from a little bit of air.
Yes. And even that first pour, if you let it sit for 15 or 20 minutes, it really benefits from that.
Yeah. But it is a perfect like fire pour though. Like it's really good for like sit out back on your porch and sip on it. Like my estimation, I thought it was just perfect for that.
Yeah, I mean it's grain forward, but it's got a lot of oak influence. Had some maltiness to it too, which like the mouthfeel was what surprised me the most. Right. But you could tell it was the pot still. It's got that pot still, like the funkiness that we always talked about.
Well, and speaking of malt, one of the things that's really interesting is you all have done a lot of malted whiskeys over the period of time. Like I have the 100% malted rye, like the 375. And like, I think that's really cool. Like you all experiment with that. So it can, those flavor profiles, if you've tried enough of your maybe malt series, you can get and pick up different, flavor profile.
Right. And we've done that. We did the 100% malted rye. We've done bourbon with malted rye instead of, 13% malted rye rather than 13% straight rye.
Yeah.
And I've done it with, so the malting of other grains as well. So, that has been, if you talked about the small barrels early on, that was one of the components that we changed up, with the different malts and malting of grains and then the different profiles of malt like chocolate and caramel malts and things like that. And
so like, being craft, but also being part of a larger conglomeration, right? Does that give you like more ability to experiment in that way to see what's going to work best for Limestone Branch as a whole, like as you all move forward?
It does. It allows, and it also allows me access to more barrels that we had. So it's been a great partnership, and just talking with Ian, like the Master Distiller up at MGP in Cincinnati, and being able to talk about that and talk about what we're doing and different things. Of course, John Rempe over at Luxro. I mean, it's great to have those resources. And of course, when we opened, one of the things that is great about Kentucky is, we had people from Maker's Mark and different people coming over saying, if you need anything, just let us know. We'll be happy to help you, any way we can. Yeah. And I think that's, from what I understand, that's pretty unique to Kentucky.
Yeah.
I was going to say, being in Lebanon's pretty beneficial too, with, Maker's Mark right down the road, and then ISC's pretty close to here too.
Right. We can almost roll the barrels over.
Yeah. So it's right around the corner, even though we think it's pretty far out here.
It's far out here, but once you're out here, then it's not.
Yeah.
20 minutes south of Bardstown or so.
I mean, to be honest though, it's only 2 turns past the square.
Yeah, it's not difficult to get here. It's just a little bit.
That's the way I think about it. Just it's 2 turns past the square.
Yeah, it's a Kentucky drive over a couple rolling hills.
Right.
And you pass a really interesting college/school on the way out here that like looks like it should be like in downtown Louisville.
Yeah. Which is it was a school. The school closed and now it's a rehab center.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So
learn something new every day.
Yeah.
Wow.
But like I was just kind of impressed. I was staring at it on the way out here. I'm like, that thing doesn't look like it belongs in between Bardstown, Springfield, Lebanon. But
was it St. Catherine?
St. Catherine.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful countryside out here.
100%.
That's one of the reasons I wanted when we were going to open the distillery, I wanted a rural distillery.
Yeah. Well, and you're far enough away, but you're close enough at the same time, right? Like,
right.
It's your own thing. You're not next to Heaven Hill, but you're not 300 miles from Heaven Hill either, right? You're literally 20 miles from Bardstown.
Right. And when we first started, that seemed like
Forever.
A bigger obstacle. Now people are used to, going to the different distilleries here and there, and 20 minutes is not a big deal.
Well, and you're going to continue to probably see more stuff go in Lebanon, Springfield. Like, there's only so much ground in Bardstown for like people to build more stuff. So you touched on it about production, and I just, just to check in, like, where are you all on for production? Like, how many barrels are you all producing a week now? And, what's that look like for you?
We're right around 7
barrels
a day.
A day.
Yeah.
Nice.
So up from, 1 or 2.
Yeah. And then did you all continue to grow your pot? Is your pot bigger than it was?
It was. We have a 1,000-gallon stripping still.
Okay.
And then what we used to use for our stripping still, we now use for our finished still, which is 600 gallons.
Okay. Nice. So that's been since we've been here.
Well, it's been 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of growth.
2 years.
Yeah.
You close your eyes in a distillery and come back the next day and something's changed, right?
In Kentucky, my gosh, every single distillery, is just like booming. And, the small craft distilleries, everybody's, adding on and increasing production or,
squeezing something in this corner over here.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Another fermenter or two or.
A lot of that has to do with the change in the tax code.
Mm.
And I don't think that people realize that as much, how important that was for the small distilleries.
Yeah.
Because when we first opened, we were paying over $12 a gallon, proof gallon tax.
Oh, boy.
And then they passed the temporary and then finally codified it, where now for the first 100,000 gallons, you pay $2.65.
That's a big difference.
Yeah. So that's basically $1 million if you're doing 100,000 that used to go to the government that now people are using to expand, to build new buildings.
Reinvest in the business, yeah.
So it really, a lot of times you think, oh, well, if they cut this tax, did it really help or whatever? Did the people just pocket it? But you can look around across the country.
Oh, yeah.
And see the investments that are going in the smaller distilleries.
I mean, can you think about it saving $10 per gallon? Like, just for context, like if you're filling up your gas tank, think about that for a minute. You went from like $300 for your, $12 gallon, your 12-gallon gas tank to, back to your normal 35.
And we had to pay it every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks back in the beginning, I was writing out a check, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000.
Oh,
every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, it was difficult,
Well, and that's what people don't realize, I think, about starting a distillery, like, and starting from scratch. Like, it takes money. Like, it's not a cheap endeavor to buy land, build your property, and then once you start producing, you got to start paying.
Right.
Like, it's not like, oh, hey, this is going into a bonded warehouse. We'll get you in 4 years. Nope.
Yeah, and it's so capital intensive.
Yeah.
It is just so capital intensive. And, that was one of the benefits of having a partner like we have.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, it's great. And like, you're bringing back a brand that people know and understand, right? Like that's also a beautiful part of it, because it didn't take a lot of consumer education, because people were familiar, even though it's been resurrected, like people were familiar with Yellowstone, but also Yellowstone from, hey, it got a claim on TV. It also, like, people started going out west and going to Yellowstone. Like, that couldn't have hurt either.
Right. No, it's all come together great.
Yeah.
And, I always just say, we're one of the few bourbons that have been continuously sold for it's our 150th anniversary this year.
Wow.
So we never didn't go dark during Prohibition, because Yellowstone was licensed to Brown-Forman, and it was sold during Prohibition. We have the bottle out there, for medicinal purpose only.
Oh.
So, and very few bourbons can actually say that they went, continuously sold.
Wow.
That's big time. It's real big time.
That's why if you don't recognize the label, you've not been looking.
No. Well, you've only been looking at like one part of the shelf.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to take a brief break here because Stephen pulled out something real cool on the shelf that we're going to sample and talk about here in a second.
Got kind of quiet there for a second.
Yeah, it did. I was like, how are we going to do this? And I was like, just pause. Okay, so we're back here in action. We have the Limestone Branch Limited Edition 2022 finished in Marsala cask. It's always 101 proof.
Yes.
And this is the third year in the new style bottle from the cylinders. So as you come up with these casks and these blends, like, are you just kind of saying, hey, what's out there? Or do you have an idea going into it on what you want to create?
Well, we do with what's available.
Yeah.
Obviously, so I have to see what casks we can get. And then I will generally go, okay, well, we can get this cask, like the Amarone or the Armagnac or the Marsala wine so I'll choose 2 or 3 casks. Then I literally go to the liquor store and buy a bottle of nice Marsala or nice Armagnac and just add a few drops to our bourbon blend that I'm going to use and say, okay, this works, or this I don't like the way this is going. So, and that's how I start the process.
Okay.
And then we'll get a cask or two to try, and then from there we go to the full on.
Oh, nice. So playing off the red wine, right? Do you like that red wine finish, or is it, that was the one that was, your 3 or 4, that was the one that stuck out the most to you this year as you were going through that selection process?
The Amarone, that was last year.
Okay.
So the Marsala is more like a rosé type of wine.
Okay.
It's not necessarily
not like a deep red. So
Right.
this is, and I could probably shoot myself because I should look at the color, because it's more like caramely-ish color wise versus where you get a red, it's going to be like real
Deep
dark burgundy.
amber. Yeah. This is more like golden hue.
And so when you're going through that process, I think, are you looking for something that fits well within the blending of the whiskey? Or are you looking at, hey, let's do something a little bit different than we did the years prior?
Well, I definitely want to do something different than the year prior.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I'm looking for flavors that are going to just kind of play off the bourbon notes and expand it into just a little bit different area.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it to be about the finish.
Yeah.
And, if you taste this, it's not about the finish. You can tell it's finished, but it's not the overall flavor profile. And that's kind of my trademark, I think. I hope.
Well, it kind of reminds me of Minor Case, right? I could tell Minor Case is a finished dry whiskey. Like it's in there, but like it's an accent note. It's not a dominant note. Like in here, like I get the grape notes in there. Like I can tell that there is wine, but like I wouldn't say that it dominates the brown sugar type molasses types notes in there. Oak, tannin, like all of those are present. There's some vanilla, but I think it's a really rich, desserty. Is how I would describe this.
It surprises me that that's kind of like a rosé type wine.
Yeah.
Well,
With the way this,
yeah,
the way this drinks, it's very rich. Like
it's kind of like
molasses.
a white. I'm trying to think. Marsala is kind of like a caramely white color.
And so like that's what I would say. Like it's got a lot of depth to it. It's not a big dry wine. Like it doesn't dry your palate out.
Right.
So but it makes you want some more. And I think for me, like this would go great with a creme brulee. Like you pair this with a creme brulee and you're like in heaven.
Right.
Because it's got all those sugars and those burnt sugar type notes. But then like on the mix of like the fruit that this brings forward, because it does have a fruit finish, like on like your palate, not like finish from the whiskey.
Right.
I think people would get confused if I said that.
And Minor Case, you were talking about that earlier. It also has some fruit notes in there as well, that I think play very well with that. And same with this. And with the limited edition, I'm looking for something that is, it's going to be special. You're going to do. It's definitely a sipping bourbon, and you enjoy it with maybe a cigar or around the fire, like you were talking earlier. So it's a little bit different than just like the Yellowstone Select, which is our standard, which, you can pour in a cocktail, you can sip it neat, this one is a little bit more geared toward sipping.
Yeah. It's more of a nuanced whiskey versus a straightforward whiskey.
Right.
And the 101 proof, I mean, it provides enough punch.
It's just right there.
Yeah.
It's right where you want it to be. Any hot, like if that was probably 110, I think it would just be outbalanced. The 101 gives you a nice balanced flavor.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I really enjoy this one.
Yeah.
As well.
So I know it's like picking a baby. Like which one's your favorite? So over the years you've done, I think back to 2015. Okay, that's what I thought. Just making sure
You're the historian here for.
To be honest,
the limited editions.
So the limited editions are one of we didn't talk about this in the Hunt episode that we did earlier, but the limited editions are one of the ones that I really enjoy finding. And so I went all over Southern Indiana and I found literally all the cylinder ones a year and a half ago. And I paid like $99 for each. And I was like, okay. But now I have 2015 through 2019.
The 18 was
the last cylinder. Yeah. So I have all of those, which are great. So now I'm going to ask you, since 2015, what's your favorite baby?
Wow. And it is difficult, and I have a great answer for that product line, but out of the limited edition, it's difficult.
Yeah,
because they are so unique and so, and obviously I like them all, or wouldn't have put them out.
Yeah,
but I guess I would go back to the 105 just because it was the very first one, my very first blend of that I did. And, and it is a great whiskey.
Yeah, I really liked 2017 and 2017 was probably my favorite. And I really liked the Armagnac finish. I liked that one a lot too. I think just kind of, it brought the new bottle forward. It brought just a little bit of everything with it. So I think that just for me, from a nostalgia perspective, is like, hey, let's do something a little bit different.
Those are two great ones. Those are right up there with mine as well. 2017.
Yeah.
A lot of people like the 18 because it was a little softer.
Yeah.
And a little bit, it was just easy drinking.
Yeah.
And 2017 had that little bit of that Kentucky hug that, kind of grabbed you. And that's the way I kind of like whiskey.
Yeah. It gave you a little punch. And so, that's what I think is so fun about September, right? There's just so many unique whiskeys out to try. And this one, I think people need to be put on their radar. Because it's priced well, first and foremost. And it's a brand that I think people need to get back in touch with. That's my personal opinion, because it has the history, it's got the context. And I think what y'all are doing here is really unique in the partnership and sharing the barrels and bringing forth a well-balanced whiskey to people in a limited edition platform is really nice.
Yeah. And the thing about this is, it used to hang around a little bit longer than it does now.
Yeah.
But because now it disappears pretty quickly. But it's still not such a limited release that people cannot find it or see it out there.
So, as we kind of close up, here today, you're about to embark on a 3-state, 12-city tour. Talk to us a little bit about this awesome tour bus that you got behind the distillery today.
Oh, this is kind of crazy, right?
I thought a rock star was here.
He feels like a rock star.
Well, we do have Crockett here today.
Yeah.
So, that's the rock star, not a country star, but it's like, wow, that is amazing. And I'm really looking forward to getting out there and talking with people around the country. That's what I do anyway most of the time.
Yeah,
is out speaking with people. But this just really kind of pushes home the point of, it's our 150th anniversary.
Yeah,
and that's what we're trying to get across. And of course, the dogs get to come with me this way.
So how do you feel being on a tour bus? Have you ever been on a tour bus before?
Have not been on a tour bus.
So do you feel like you're high rolling?
It is. Let me tell you. I would never have guessed in 2011 when we opened up the distillery that this is where we would be, or I would be, in 10 years, 11 years later.
Driving around a big branded tour bus.
I mean, it's pretty sweet, to be honest. Like I pulled up, I was like, I knew they had a concert today, but I'm like, who's that other tour bus for? And then it's the beer nose loving Stephen B. Beam. I mean, I still enjoy a good beer nose pizza, so I always have to say that.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you say that because I was in beer nose for right at 10 years, just a little shy of 10 years. And people say, you ever get tired? And I was like, I never got tired of the pizza.
Yeah.
Ever. I could eat it every day.
Yeah.
And I did. And that was why I gained, like 25 pounds or whatever.
and I'm sure you say the same thing about whiskey. Like, you could drink it every day.
And I do.
Amen. Amen to that.
Part of it.
Yeah. So on this tour that you're about to embark on, is there any city that stands out to you that you're stopping in?
Well, we're going to we're going up to Columbus.
Oh, nice.
So going to Ohio State game, and I have two nephews who are graduated from Ohio State, big Ohio State fans. So
awesome.
that will be great to see them and see some family. Then we're going to go over to the eastern side of Ohio, and then back to Michigan, and we're going to do Smitty's up in Grand Rapids, which Smitty's is a great friend of mine, and I'm glad that we get to spend there, and then head down to Missouri, and we've got several different dinners and events down there. And then what I'm really excited about too is we have events that involve dogs.
Awesome.
So Case and Char will get to socialize and spread the Yellowstone word as well.
Do they get their own branded T-shirt?
It's funny that I had a patch for their vests there.
Yeah.
And I had taken them up to Springfield Laundry to get embroidered.
Yeah.
And the laundry burned down.
Oh gosh.
So it was too late to get
goodness.
So yeah, bad luck for them. And so they don't have any. I think we have some neckerchiefs, branded neckerchiefs. So.
I think they're looking forward to naps on the tour bus.
Yeah.
By the look of it.
They've been asleep the entire time we've done the podcast. That's, what Scott's favorite type of dog is? A sleeping dog.
A sleeping dog.
Yeah. Now I have a puppy at home, and my favorite type of dog is a sleeping dog. And puppies are wild. It's like having a second child.
Yep. Well, they're 5 and 6.
Yeah.
And so starting to calm down some. And I have a house down in Florida. I drive back and forth.
Yeah.
And it's a 13-hour drive.
They do good in the car?
And they sleep. They do that the entire way.
That's awesome.
They're ready for the tour.
Yeah, they're ready. Well, they're gonna have room to walk around. They might not know what's up.
I did recently read that the laziest dog was the chow.
Oh, well, you got 2 of them,
and they are pretty lazy.
Yeah, I had a lab chow mix for a long time, and she was 17 when she passed away. But good disposition. Early on, they got a lot of energy, but then they tame pretty quick.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, this is super interesting. I think everyone needs to be on the lookout for Stephen B. Beam on the way. If you're at the Ohio State game here in a few weeks, make sure or soon go check them out.
You can't miss the tour.
You can't miss it. It says Yellowstone on it all over the place. It's great, and it's great to be back with you.
Great to be back with you. And we do have new things coming out.
So
we'll just tease you with that. Can't tell you what it is.
He's telling you there's a teaser, but he won't tell you what the teaser is. But here it is.
That's good radio, because that means we have to have another podcast and all that stuff comes out.
We'll be back.
Yeah, we'll be back. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for coming out. And
happy Bourbon Heritage Month.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. It's the best time to be in Kentucky.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bourbon Lens. As always, if you want to find out more about Limestone Branch or Yellowstone, just go over to social media, type those in. You'll be able to find them pretty quickly. If you want to learn more about Bourbon Lens, go over to Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Bourbon Lens. And lastly, please go to your favorite podcast listening app, give us a 5-star review, and leave a comment. We'd greatly appreciate it. And until next time, cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.